We had roughly 20 to 30 people coming on 3 separate boats with us. And so we were all following each other out there as one big group, 20 or 30 people spread out, where we all met at the dock before, and then we departed to go to Horn Island. It wasn't just, there were so many people, we had to split up between 3 boats, and we all left and all got there at the same time.
3 weeks since an 18-year-old football player went out on the water with his friends to celebrate the 4th of July and never made it home. This week gave us more than the entire month combined. A friend who finally spoke. An independent autopsy raising more questions than it settles. A rescuer describing exactly what he saw from 400 feet in the air. And a video, grainy and unconfirmed, that might be the last time anyone laid eyes on Nolan Wells alive. This case isn't slowing down, it's accelerating, and every week, new evidence is changing what we know. If you want to stay ahead of every verified development as it happens, subscribe now, because this story is far from over. Let's get into it.
Benjamin Crump should be ashamed of himself. Al Sharpton should be ashamed of themselves. I'm right here in Mississippi. It's crazy that I had to fly down here to even get this information. They've been lying on these boys. I got evidence, and I'm going to show it to you, and I'm going to lay it out for you. It is a shame that that boy Nolan did not get the respect that he deserved. In my opinion, they turned his death into a racial thing, destroying the community. You name it, they did it. And we got evidence that it wasn't just 4 boys with him. We got evidence that they asked Nolan to get back on the boat, and he refused to because he grown. We got evidence that the boys reached out to the parents, that Benjamin Crump and them didn't refuse to reach out to these boys. And I've talked to them. I've seen the evidence with my own eyes. I've seen that there was more than just 4 people. There was 3 boats full of kids. I know that they left and they had nothing to do with this. And instead of them saying and standing up for these boys and saying, look, we don't know what happened. We want justice for Nolan. These boys didn't have no involvement. Instead, they want to make it about race. And it is a shame. And I'm so heated, man. I went out to Horn Island. We got all the video. We got the interviews. The boys wanted to talk to me because I'm the only one there to give them a voice, because everybody else is fake, fraudulent, looking out for themselves. And it's a shame, man.
One name kept surfacing in this case without ever actually saying anything. Warren Hudson, 18 years old, one of the group on that boat, and by his own description, Nolan's best friend. He's also the son of a Mississippi Chancery Judge, Ashley Cole, which is part of why his name carried so much weight the moment people started asking who was last to see Nolan alive. For most of July, Warren said nothing publicly. His mother spoke instead, posting that her family's thoughts were with the Wells family, that neither she nor her husband were on Horn Island that day, and that her son had cooperated fully with investigators. She noted that she and Nolan's mother, Christine Wansley, went to the same high school. It read like an attempt to lower the temperature. It didn't work. A judge's family being connected to the case only poured gasoline on a fire already spreading across every timeline in the country. Then, this week, Warren stopped letting his mother carry the conversation. He sat down with the New York Post and, separately, with YouTuber Brandon Tatum, his first real on-record comment since Nolan died. He didn't lay out a new timeline or offer a previously unheard detail. What he did was push back hard on the idea that he had anything to do with what happened. He called the online pile-on sickening, pointed out there are no confirmed facts yet, just rumors, and said it's exhausting being treated like a suspect when no charges, no arrests, and no official cause of death have even been announced.
I mean, Horn Island on the 4th of July is the most popular day to be on the water on, throughout the entire Gulf Coast. Roughly, probably 2 to 3, maybe even 4,000 people out there. There were boats lined up off the island. I mean, there was 1 row of boats, and then there was another row of boats, and then there was a 3rd row of boats. Yeah. I mean, there was people lined up all up and down the island. So we were parked on the north side, on the west tip. It wasn't just there, but just where we were, I mean, there was easily 1,000 people. I had a couple conversations with Nolan that day, and I talked to him and a couple of my other buddies in a group. I was not focused on anyone solely, like looking and pointing anyone out. I mean, I was talking to my friends that I haven't seen in a while from high school. I was talking from people I knew from college. I was talking to, everybody my age and even people older. I mean, it was just a regular thing. We're all used to this. We've been out to the islands before. My buddies don't just go out to the island on 4th of July, but they go out, every weekend. I talked to Nolan, and, Nolan was drinking. Everybody was drinking, most of everybody. And I mean, Nolan seemed completely fine every time I talked to him. We had just regular conversations. Nolan was making me laugh. I had a couple conversations with Nolan and Javon, Nolan and my buddy James. I talked to Nolan a couple times, but it wasn't like I was strictly sitting there talking to Nolan the whole day. I mean, there was hundreds of people I knew out there. So
Warren took a boat to Horn Island with Brandon Tatum and walked the exact stretch of sand where he last saw Nolan on July 4th. On camera, they pushed back on the idea that Horn Island was some secluded stretch of coastline where a small group could disappear from view. It wasn't. Even on a random Monday afternoon, weeks later, other boats were anchored nearby. On the actual holiday, the island was packed. Boats stacked on top of each other, according to one witness, music and drinking and hundreds of people across the sand. Warren's point: the idea of Nolan quietly vanishing unnoticed is harder to swallow once you understand how crowded that beach really was. Here's what's kept this story alive, though. According to Judge Cole's own account, Warren told his mother he last saw Nolan around 3 in the afternoon, roughly when the rest of the group got back on their boat and headed for the mainland. Nolan, they say, chose to stay behind. He'd met a girl, wanted to hang around longer, and would catch a ride back with someone else later. Except nobody has ever come forward and said they were that someone else. And with reward money now at $125,000, that silence says something on its own. For weeks, this case had almost no hard physical evidence attached to it publicly. That changed when attorney Ben Crump stood in front of cameras at the NAACP's National Convention in Chicago and released the findings of the independent autopsy the family commissioned. Quick context: Mississippi performed its own official autopsy shortly after Nolan's body was recovered. That report, including toxicology, still hasn't been made public. Frustrated by the silence, the family brought in their own forensic pathologist, Dr. Roger Mitchell, former chief medical examiner for Washington, D.C., now head of the National Medical Association. Civil rights activist Colin Kaepernick paid for the exam. Mitchell received Nolan's body on July 10th and released preliminary findings on July 19th. He found an area of discoloration on the back of Nolan's head in the soft tissue beneath the skin, reddish, roughly the size of a sheet of paper. He could not explain what caused it. Not conclusively an injury, not conclusively harmless, just unexplained, and, in his opinion, needing further investigation. Then the part that's genuinely unsettling. When Mitchell examined Nolan's neck and throat, key structures were missing: the trachea, the cartilage around the voice box, small bones, and tissue that would normally still be present for a second autopsy. According to Mitchell, this is because the original medical examiner's office retained those parts for further imaging, a fairly standard practice when there's any concern about a neck injury, not on its own evidence of a cover-up. Forensic pathology organizations confirm that retaining neck structures for follow-up radiographic study is routine. But because those structures weren't available to him, Mitchell said flatly, he cannot rule out a neck injury as a contributor to Nolan's death. Not that there was one, just that he didn't have what he'd need to rule it out. It gets more complicated. Because the original autopsy had already removed and examined Nolan's internal organs, the second exam couldn't independently check his lungs for water, one of the most basic ways pathologists confirm or question a drowning, or his stomach contents. And by the time Mitchell examined the body on July 10th, 4 days after recovery, decomposition had progressed enough to mask bruising or other soft tissue injuries. So Mitchell's official conclusion: both cause and manner of death remain undetermined. Not homicide, not accident. Undetermined, pending more records from the original autopsy and toxicology results that still haven't surfaced from either exam. Crump says that isn't good enough and wants the original findings shared with the family's pathologist. Some experts say these limitations are typical of any second autopsy performed after an initial one. Others aren't willing to write it off that easily, especially given how little the sheriff's department has said publicly. Neither view has been proven. Back to July 6th, the morning Nolan's body was found. New details this week from someone who was in the air when it happened. Brian Trasher, vice president of the United Cajun Navy, spoke to TMZ about those final hours of searching. By July 6th, the search had stretched into its second day. Bad weather on the water pushed the team into the air instead. Trasher and a pilot had been flying for roughly 2 hours when they spotted several law enforcement boats converging fast on the northwest tip of Horn Island. They flew closer and saw it themselves, a body floating face down near the shoreline.
You were involved when the body was eventually located and found. What can you tell me about the state and position that the body was in that hasn't been reported?
Yeah, so again, just to put it into perspective, it was I'm told it was about 08:45 on 6 July when a park ranger on Horn Island discovered the body, called it in to law enforcement. We had myself and the gentleman who donated his plane that day out of Gulfport. We had been flying for about 2 hours at that point. We were making a track going from Horn Island over to Ship Island down to Chandelier Island, which is south of both of those islands, about another 30 miles. So we were coming back up north towards the northwest tip of Horn Island when we noticed there were boats in the center of the island where there's a lagoon, and then we saw some boats approaching the northwest tip. And then when we got closer, we noticed there were 2 boats already parked in tandem on the beach. That was strange. It was a Monday morning. It was obvious they weren't fishing. So we descended and to about maybe 450 feet, 500 feet, and we could tell it was law enforcement boats, law enforcement personnel. So we descended maybe another 100 feet or so, circled around, and that's when I saw a law enforcement presence gathering on that northwest point, and then I noticed that there was what appeared to be a body right at the shoreline, laying face down on the sand.
The implication is that this body had washed up, unfortunately, on the shore.
That's what it looked like to me, yeah.
Did you see any visible injuries or anything that you can speak to at that distance?
No, from that height, right? So it's best I can do. The description matched Nolan Wells. It matched the area. It was the area where we were looking. So I had good reason to believe, even before I heard from the sheriff's office, that it was him. The swim trunks appeared to be similar color to what was reported. The one thing I'll say about the condition of the body, and again, I want to stress very, as much as I can, that I'm at 450 feet in the air. So I did not have a good ground's eye view look. But normally when a body's been floating, you'll see some bloating and whatnot. He wasn't in the water that long. The water temperature was high. He has a low body mass index, so both of those factors together. Normally we'll look for a body to pop up on about day 4, but we knew it was possible he could pop up as soon as day 2, and this was day 2. Again, the body, I'm trying to think of the most respectful way to say it. The body did not seem at that height to be disproportionate to the way it should look. Now, I could not get a good look at his face. I could not get a good look of the front side of his body, which was on the beach. I was really looking at his back of his legs, back of his arms, that kind of thing. And so that was my vantage point, and I just want to stress to everybody that that's not an ideal vantage point. It's just what I could see, and plus I'm flying at like 90 knots, so I'm going pretty fast. So I'm really getting when I say a glimpse, it's a glimpse.
From 400 feet up, Trasher couldn't make out a face or any visible injuries, but the location was remarkably close to where Nolan was last known to be. His theory, and he was careful to call it exactly that, since he's a volunteer, not an investigator, involves dangerous rip currents in that stretch, the kind rescue teams nickname a washing machine current for how violently it pulls and churns. If Nolan went in near where he was last seen, that could explain both what happened and why the body was found so close by. There's also confusion about what condition Nolan's body was in. Trasher described him as fully clothed. A separate United Cajun Navy official told People magazine he was found wearing only swim trunks. Two first-hand accounts, two different details. The kind of inconsistency that's kept this case from settling into any clean narrative. Trasher also confirmed he has aerial photos from that morning. He hasn't given them to Nolan's parents yet. Not withholding them, just worried about how traumatic the images might be, and says if Christine and Elmore want them, all they have to do is ask. This is the piece that feels like a genuine break in the case. TMZ obtained footage recorded on Horn Island on July 4th, time-stamped at 2:23 p.m. The camera pans across a stretch of water packed with boats, floaties, coolers, then briefly catches a young black man on the back deck of a boat, bent over, reaching for a drink. You never see his face, but the shorts he's wearing appear to match, in color, the ones Nolan was photographed wearing earlier that day. NBC News confirmed the location matches previously verified footage from Horn Island that afternoon. Two people who knew Nolan reviewed the clip and told NBC they believe it could be him, though neither would say it for certain, since his face isn't visible. Whoever filmed it brought it directly to the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. Investigators say they're aware of the clip and looking into it. Here's why the timing matters more than the video itself. If that is Nolan at 2:23, it places him alive and apparently fine, roughly 2 hours before his friend's boat left the island. GPS data from that boat shows it didn't actually leave Horn Island until around 4:30, and dispatch audio from that trip reveals something new. About half an hour before leaving, someone on the boat called for help, saying their bilge pump had failed and they were taking on water near the west tip of Horn Island and asked for a tow. When the dispatcher asked if everyone aboard was okay, the answer was simple. Yes, everybody's fine. A 2:23 video that might show Nolan safe on a boat, a 4 o'clock emergency call about a different boat taking on water, a 4:30 departure from the island without Nolan. And, to this day, not one person has publicly said they saw Nolan Wells after 4:30 that afternoon. That's the gap this case lives inside. It's also worth noting what the video doesn't show. No argument, no distress, no confirmation of foul play in any direction. Just, if it really is Nolan, a young man reaching for a drink on a crowded holiday afternoon. Ordinary footage that, only in hindsight, might turn out to be someone's last. Christine Wansley and Elmore Wansley have been consistent from day one. They don't believe their son chose to stay behind alone. Elmore told CBS Mornings it isn't in Nolan's character, and that as a parent, he'd have made sure his son got back on that boat. They've also pushed back on the idea this was a simple drowning, pointing out Nolan was, by every account, a strong swimmer. Early statements from the sheriff's department describing the case as one with no foul play, suspected did not sit well with the family. Language, Christine says, made her and Elmore deeply uncomfortable, especially before toxicology or a completed investigation could back it up. The family's independent investigation, run through Crump's team, has expanded beyond the autopsy. Crump says he's working with prosecutors to examine Nolan's phone, which by multiple accounts wasn't with Nolan when he disappeared, but was in the possession of another young man on the trip. Christine says she tracked that phone's location afterward using a family sharing app and has raised questions about messages she believes were deleted around the time of Nolan's disappearance. None of that has been independently confirmed. There's also been a moment of reassurance. Jackson County District Attorney Angel Myers-McElrath met directly with Crump and the Wells family in a sit-down Crump described as respectful and candid. Out of that meeting, confirmation that once the sheriff's investigation wraps up, the case will go to a grand jury. Standard procedure in Mississippi, not an indication anyone currently suspects a crime. The FBI has confirmed involvement too, narrower than online speculation suggested, centered on assisting with digital evidence and addressing interstate threats made against people connected to the case. Sheriff John Ledbetter has said Jackson County remains the lead agency, and that FBI assistance isn't unusual given Horn Island sits on federally protected land. Investigators have interviewed more than 60 witnesses, along with all 3 friends who were on the boat with Nolan. The reward has climbed to $125,000, starting at $50,000 from Reverend Al Sharpton at Nolan's funeral, matched on the spot by Tyler Perry, who also covered the funeral costs, with former NFL receiver Terrell Owens adding another $25,000. Nolan's funeral took place July 20th at Centerpoint Church in Ocean Springs, the community where he grew up. Sharpton officiated, Spike Lee and Terrell Owens attended. Christine asked mourners for one thing above everything else: keep sharing her son's story so his name doesn't fade the way so many other cases do once the news cycle moves on. The Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office told TMZ the original autopsy followed standard procedures used for every case their office handles, and confirmed the case remains active. Beyond that, the Sheriff's Department has gone more than a week without a real public update, and for a family already frustrated by early no-foul play language, that silence hasn't helped rebuild trust. NAACP President Derek Johnson has criticized how the investigation's been handled, arguing a complete investigation needs to happen before anyone speculates about an accident. Stephen A. Smith has said publicly that much of the Black community watching this case has grown suspicious of how it's being investigated. Those are opinions, not findings, but they reflect how much public trust is riding on whatever comes out officially. Even Nolan's grandfather has asked people to stop pointing fingers online and let law enforcement do its job. A reminder that even within the family, there's tension between wanting accountability and worrying that speculation could target the wrong people or drown out the actual investigation. A GoFundMe for the family has climbed past $66,000 on top of the funeral costs and the six-figure reward. No official cause of death from either autopsy. No released toxicology. No explanation for the discoloration on the back of Nolan's head. No way to confirm or rule out a neck injury, since the parts needed for that weren't available. No account of who, if anyone, Nolan was with during the 2 hours between the 2:23 video and his friends leaving at 4:30. And still nobody claiming to be the ride he supposedly planned to catch back to the mainland. No suspects have been named. No one has been charged. And the Sheriff's Department has stayed largely silent for over a week, fueling more speculation. This case has become something bigger than one missing person report out of coastal Mississippi. A national conversation about race, about how these stories get treated differently depending on who's at the center, about transparency from local law enforcement, and about how fast the internet builds a narrative around fragments of video, GPS pings, and secondhand statements. Some of those narratives will turn out to be right, some won't. That's why sticking to confirmed facts matters, even when it's slower and less satisfying. Nolan Wells was 18. He'd just graduated high school and was playing football at Southwest Mississippi Community College, getting ready for the new season. By every account, he had a way of making people around him feel seen. A young man went out on the water for a holiday with his friends, and he never came home. There's a grand jury process ahead, toxicology results that haven't surfaced from either autopsy, a phone investigation still unfolding, still no explanation for that discoloration, and still no one who stepped forward as the ride Nolan was waiting for. And there's a family in Ocean Springs that has made it clear they won't stop asking questions until they get real answers. Not assumptions, not language like no foul play suspected handed to them days after finding their son's body. We're going to keep following every update in this case as it comes in. So, what's the detail that doesn't sit right with you? The missing ride? The mismatched clothing accounts? The half-hour gap before that bilge pump call? Drop your theory in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss the next update the moment it drops.